I guess I like object to like inheritance. Wouldn't like the government do like a way better job? Like don't they have like the resources, or like shouldn't they be responsible? I wouldn't imagine it to be like a very like Christian kind of idea.
Hello, I'm Dimetri Fleming. In this episode, my Discord members raised some intriguing questions about Christian labor. We even discussed capitalism. Join the Discord and become part of one of our covenant calls with the link in the description. Enjoy the show. As the Westminster Catechism, question 1 states, man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. With this in mind, how do we conduct our affairs while on earth? What should we keep in mind while we desire to glorify God the most we can before we pass into eternity? Should we stay away from successful businesses because it could lead us into temptation? Should men be afraid of taking risks? For starters, Jesus taught that we have 2 commandments that form the basis for the 10 commandments that we must follow in this life. The first is to love God. The second is to love people. Loving God looks like the first 4 commandments, which are 1. To have no other gods before the Lord. 2. Make no idols or graven images. 3. Not to take His name in vain. And 4. To honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy. The next 6 commandments are our duties toward fellow men. The 5th, you shall honor your father and mother. 6, you shall not murder. 7, you shall not commit adultery. 8, you shall not steal. 9, you shall not bear false witness. And the 10th, you shall not covet. These commandments continue to break off into even more specific applications. Not having any other gods before the Lord does not merely look like not worshiping Allah and God at the same time. It could also look like keeping yourself from the love of money, pleasure, lust, or any other thing that would get in the way of your fellowship with God. Someone who plays video games for too long would break the first commandment by having another God before the Lord. This person would also simultaneously, at least indirectly, break every other commandment of the 10 commandments. He would, 2, have an idol. 3, would be blaspheming God by, as an image bearer, not glorifying Him as he ought to. 4, he would not be rightly preparing his heart for the Lord's Day, Sunday, because he's sinning against God. The 5th, he would not be honoring his father and mother because he's not living a holy life to either be used to convert them to Christianity or to give his parents joy in their Christian walk. The 6th, he would be murdering in his heart by not considering the people whom he could use his time to effectively help as he makes a worthwhile impact on the world for God's glory. The 7th, he would be committing spiritual adultery against God, who, if he is a Christian, God has made the bride of Christ. 8, he would be stealing from the time that God has given him to steward well. It would also be stealing from the honor due to God's name by wasting his time. The 9th, he would be lying to the world about what a born-again Christian should look like. He would be, by his actions, lying about the holiness of God to the watching world. The 10th, he would be coveting, which is desire something that belongs to someone else, the video games that he should not be spending his time playing. And even these instances could be explained in much more depth. This is why we are in desperate need for God's grace. Jesus Christ, who cleanses from all sins by living the perfect life on their behalf, dying on the cross, and rising from the dead, is the one man who can give us access to God's holiness. He is the one who can provide us with a godly work ethic for God's glory. We must keep in mind the serious, and sometimes not immediately perceived, consequences of sin. Jesus promises a reward in heaven for the faithful Christians in this life, even according to how much they grew in holiness while on earth. With this being so, we should store up rewards in heaven. But this brings up a question from earlier. Should we stay away from successful businesses because it could lead us into temptation? The answer is an obvious no. The Proverbs have much to say about righteous men who accumulate wealth, not because they love wealth, but because they love God. They want to be used to further His kingdom. Proverbs 10:4, A slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. Proverbs 11:24. There is one who scatters, yet increases more, and there is one who withholds more than what is right, but it leads to poverty. Proverbs 11:26. The people will curse him who withholds grain, but blessing will be on the head of him who sells it. Proverbs 13:4. The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly supplied. Proverbs 13:11. Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. Proverbs 14:23. In all toil there is profit, but mere talk tends only to poverty. Proverbs 16:3. Commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established. Proverbs 21:5. The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. Proverbs 22:16. Whoever oppresses the poor to increase his own wealth or gives to the rich will only come to poverty. And Proverbs 22:29. Do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. But remember, keep in mind the admonition of the other proverbs that discuss wisdom's far superior worth and the vanity of riches. Proverbs 8:11 says, For wisdom is better than rubies, and all things one may desire cannot be compared with her. Proverbs 16:8, better is a little with righteousness than great revenues with injustice. Proverbs 21:6, the getting of treasures by a lying tongue is a fleeting vapor and a snare of death. And lastly, Proverbs 28:6, better is a poor man who walks in his integrity than a rich man who is crooked in his ways. As you can see here, and from stories in the Bible, such as those of Joseph, Solomon, and David, it is not inherently wrong to increase one's wealth. One must, however, do it to the glory of God and for the good of fellow men. It is even sometimes prudent for men to take risks that may seem unwise to outsiders. A man is called to provide for his wife and children. Therefore, he must make wise decisions, calling on God for wisdom, being bold, and working heartily in all that he does. It is not time to be complacent. It is time to build, fight, and work for God, the good of your current family, your future family, your church, your country, and all others around you that you may come in contact with. And so with that, I'm going to unmute everybody in the call. And so, a bit of a longer introduction than normal. The topic is godly resolve, working heartily in all things. So with that topic, there's a lot of people around that will say things like we shouldn't really work that hard because, we're gonna die anyway. But the Christian perspective is that there is life after death, that we want to do all we can in this life. And we don't want to undermine even the value of things that are temporal, that don't last forever. So do you guys have any immediate questions or thoughts on anything related, or it can be something unrelated as well? If not, I'll move on.
Yeah. Just like capitalism, it actually kind of selfish.
Capitalism? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
What do you think's the ideal form of government? As far as if it should be capitalist or socialist or communist or what?
I don't have any problems with socialism, I don't think. So I guess I'd say socialism.
Okay, that's actually a very related topic, and that's an interesting topic to get us going because, okay, so you asserted that you see problems with capitalism, you probably like socialism more. As far as biblically going, the first thing we must consider is the heart of man, okay? So whichever one you're going to have people who are evil and love money and things like that. So whichever system, you can have the perfect government system, but people are still evil and people are still going to sin and people are going to use money in evil ways. So that's the first thing. But the next thing we have to consider is the role of government. So what is the government there to do? Is the government there to distribute wealth, or is the government there to bear the sword? Okay, so what is their role? Because if the government's role, if we're talking biblically, if the government's role is to make sure that everyone has enough money and everybody's doing well, then maybe we would have some sort of argument for communism. But if the argument in the Bible is the government exists to punish those who do evil, and be a terror to them, really, be just punishing them, and that only people who do evil should be afraid, but the people that do good, they're basically able to live well and things like that. If that's the role of the government, then capitalism would be the best form of government, because it would be having a smaller government that doesn't give money. Instead, the church would be the institution that is giving to the widow, that's giving to the orphan. The church would be the one that's helping those who are needy instead of the government. And also, we have to consider what just natural elements of the world, what's going to happen, for example, if you give to someone who is who's not working, and what someone who is working will think if you give something to someone who's not working, if they will be incentivized to work. And then lastly, we would also have to consider something along the lines of what Bible verses do we have that explicitly say what should happen when people don't work, or when people don't make as much money as other people. So one verse that would instantly come to mind would be, if any man does not work, let him not eat. So we should not have a government that is feeding people who are not willing to work. If somebody is able to work, but they don't work, then there's no reason why the government should help them, because they're not working. So, for example, there would be like someone, like in America, this is very common, where Christians will see homeless people on the side of the street and they'll go, I actually think, the Bible talks much about caring for the poor, so I'm going to give this guy, you know what, let's just do $100. I'm going to give him $100. Very nice Christians who do things like that, who are misguided, because in some instances, when you know the person, it's like, okay, they actually, you're able to make a wise decision and be like, okay, they're trying to find work. Maybe like you talk to somebody, it's like, okay, they're a veteran who now they don't have they have a missing leg or something like that, and they actually need money. They can't just go get up and like work a job in construction or something. But when you have people who are on drugs, who are not working, and choose to live on the streets, Christians should not be promoting that or encouraging that, and the government shouldn't be either. So the government shouldn't be like, hey, you're doing drugs and you're living on the street and you're not doing anything and you're not willing to work either. Okay, we'll just give you like all these things. The government, if we're talking biblically, would go, okay, you don't work, then you don't eat. You're going to have to work. So like, for instance, some jails will even have people working in jail. It's like, okay, you got in jail, now you're going to do this manual labor that's difficult because you did something wrong, and now you're gonna help the government because they're feeding you and things like this. That's better. That's a better type of system. I don't know if that's even the ideal, but as far versus just giving money. And if something does give money, biblically speaking, it would be the church that's giving to the poor, to the orphan, the widow. And so my proof text, other than the one I stated about like the poor, would be Romans 13, where it actually explains and assumes the role of the government. It says, "For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain, for he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that does evil." So, key points. He's bearing the sword. What does that mean? He's going to punish, right? So even physically, often, punish those who do evil. So like with the sword would be like sometimes execution. So you murder somebody, you get executed, things like that. And punishing those who do evil. He's a revenger to execute wrath, because there has to be justice. So you can't just have people going around, you can't have just one guy, he goes and rapes a woman and then he kidnaps somebody. You can't have things like that. So the role of the government is We want to push good and make sure justice is done in society. So I would not be against, Michael, something like laws against particular kinds of financial, I'm missing the word. It's like manipulation, financial manipulation. So like, for example, I don't think you should be able to go back on a contract. So like if you sign a contract, or like, even like the government's totally able to like mandate, like, somebody gets married and like, okay, you can't just like randomly divorce people for no reason and like things like this. Like the government's allowed to do that and even make laws in a capitalistic society where it's like, okay, well, you did this, and this is immoral, and we're supposed to uphold justice. But as far as just distributing wealth, that's not the government's authority. They don't, like, they have authority to do that to some extent, where they like, you get, they're doing taxes, and they're getting taxes so that they can fund the justice that they're doing. They have to have judges, they have to have whatever they need, like to do things. There's a government. So like they need police officers or whatever. So they need taxes. But so that's distributing the wealth in a sense, I suppose. But as far as capitalism being a bad thing, I think based off those reasons, I'd have to say that capitalism is not a bad thing, and that if you do go into a socialistic or communistic framework for your ideas, because of the sinfulness of man, the people at the top are just going to be the ones getting the money, and it's not really going to be evenly distributed. And even if it was, we shouldn't want money evenly distributed, because some people work harder than others, and the people that work harder than others should get better rewards than the people who don't work as hard.
Yeah, that was good explanation. One thing that like I just thought about, so the government is responsible for like punishing people. Is that then like the church that is responsible for like rehabilitation or like charity? And like, wouldn't like the government do like a way better job? Like, don't they have like the resources, or like shouldn't they be responsible just out of like principle, like how able they are?
So, I mean, like, the government, obviously, like, they're going to go to war. And when the government goes to war, it's not like the church is necessarily going to, come with their med kits and, like, be obligated to help the people that are, like, dying in war. I'm not saying that the government, like, and, that every instance it would be wrong for the government to somehow help people. But as far as, like, distributing wealth on a wide scale, like, for instance, I think one example of this would be you have you have a lot of people who they get their they can get a lot of government money, and they'll use it on so like I saw this thing on X the other day where it was like this, I don't know if it was the food stamp stuff, but like she got that, and then she bought her whole family Wingstop or something like that. So probably spent like, I don't know, like over $100 like buying her family Wingstop. Where it's like, I would have to look into it more to say it would be wrong to give, for the government to extend, charity for like basic necessities like bread or something like that. I'd have to look more into that. But as far as just like, you know what, we're going to give you luxury when you haven't earned that luxury. I don't know. I don't even know about bread. I mean, like, bread, I think is, because it's more basic, there could be some kind of warrant for in a society that's like, they agree with that, and they're going like, okay, well, we can do things like that. I really don't know the answer to that. But, yeah, I think you do have a problem when you're like, okay, you're giving these people luxury that they didn't work for. And yeah, they might really have a hard life. That might be true, but there might also be people who they have a hard life where they earn everything that they get. They don't have food stamps or anything. There are people who, like I said, like some manual labor, like maybe they build houses or something, and they want to let their family eat out at Wingstop, but they're saving their money, right? And so they're not getting that eating out at Wingstop or something like that. They've saved their money. Well, what if the government just came along and said, we're going to forgive the loans of all these college students because, college students, they have big debts and we want to help college students out. And we're also just going to give free money to everybody. Well, what happens? Two things. The first thing that happens is now that worker has indirectly paid for the college loans of somebody who chose to pay the money to go to college. So they're paying for a luxury. College is a luxury. It's not a necessity. They're paying for the luxury of somebody else and the learning of somebody else on a wider scale. I even have some problems with the public school system, definitely the way it is right now, because you have something where you really would, in the United States at least, you'd have to descale on a lot of the things that have happened because it's become more socialistic over time, but closer to that versus like what it was actually started. But yeah, and then the second thing that I was going to say is that it actually makes money less valuable. So when you take, for instance, like you just give everybody a bunch of money or something like that, that's called inflation. So money, like $1, it's not really worth what $1 used to be like 50 years ago because they print more money and there's more circulated and the government, just gives out money. And so now somebody, that one guy who's worked so hard to save up his money for 50 years, his whole life, he wants his grandchildren to have a wonderful life, a better life than he did. He saved up all this money, and now what happens? The money's not as valuable anymore, and all the grandkids that just had parents that were broke, but they went to college and spent like $100,000, well, their loans were forgiven, and his kids, who he chose not to go to college, and he wanted to teach them, himself, okay, this is how you build, a fence, or this is how you build houses or do something like that. Well, he did that and he saved up money. Well, guess what? He's actually de-incentivized from doing that. And he's actually punished when in a society that's acting justly, they would go, oh, sir, you've worked way harder and you've had way more financial wisdom and stewardship than the people who just spent all their money on some kind of Ferrari or what, maybe they didn't, maybe there's people that don't do that, but they spend all their money eating out. That's more common. Or they buy a Starbucks coffee, twice a day. And it's they're paying $10 a day for coffee when they don't really need to do that, or just something like that. And this guy, he's actually saving, he's trying to give a better life to his grandchildren and he can't do that. So that's really important. And there's a lot of family dynamics in the Bible where you have fathers trying to provide for their family. You have grandfathers who even want to leave an inheritance. The Bible talks about how wonderful it is for a man to give an inheritance to his children's children, like a righteous man does that. So I don't remember what verse that is, but any thoughts on that though, Michael?
Yeah, no. No, that was good.
So the verse I was talking about was Proverbs 13:22. So we don't want to de-incentivize Proverbs 13:22. I'll get at this. So a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the wealth of sinners is stored up for the righteous. So focusing on this first part, we want to have a society where a good man is able to thrive. That's just called justice. A good government allows good people to thrive. So this good man, he's I want my children to do better, but it's really hard to do that in a society that's let's even say communistic. Let's imagine the government has a lot of control. Well, again, it makes it even harder for this good man because now these people, they're going to, in the communistic society, they're going to be distributing wealth to where it's not really the man who's leaving the inheritance. It's the government. If they do well, maybe they'll give their people a little bit more of this share, but they're taking so much. You really can, as a government, take too much taxes. You can make people not it just makes everybody more on the same page. I actually think it's completely biblical. Even Solomon, he was a king and he was way more rich than a lot of people. That doesn't mean he shouldn't give to the poor. That doesn't mean that he shouldn't care for his family. That doesn't mean he shouldn't, any of those things. But he was significantly richer than anybody, like way richer. And God actually blessed him. So like in the book of Job, I think it's the last chapter. I don't know if that's Job 42 is the last chapter or something like that. Okay, so this is what happened. And remember, this is God blessing him. So the Lord blessed the latter end of Job more than his beginning. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, and 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. That's what this is. So keep this in mind. If Job were in a communistic society, this is what the society would say. Yeah, we know the Lord blessed you, but we're actually going to take it upon ourselves to take what's yours, and we're just going to give, like, you'll maybe keep, like, 5% of it, but wow, I mean, like, you have so much more. Because think about this. I mean, if you imagine 14,000 sheep, these were like like the cars of this time were like animals, because you have a camel, like you get around places, or like an oxen or something. Like, this is a big deal. Like, you're getting so much clothing from sheep and all these things, to where you have slaves, or like indentured servitude, or like something like, or workers, or whatever you have, that are working these and by the way, when I say slaves, it's not the same as American slavery. That's different. But like, you have all these people working this area. You're going to be richer than all of the people working that area, probably by a lot. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, the Lord blessed him, and he could have blessed everyone equally. He could have been like, all this. But the Lord actually had specific favor on Job for what he did. He was like being, like, he was actually underwent trial, and like, He deserved this. I'm saying, humanly speaking, deserved this, because we don't really deserve anything. Everything that we have is a gift from God. But humanly speaking, he deserved this for the trial that he went through. And so, yeah, like, you would have to say that, like, this blessing from the Lord is not, like, that he should have had a significant portion, like, probably more than half of it taken away, because he, because he needs to share. But it's actually Job's responsibility to do that. So if Job was like, you know what, I'm just going to keep all of it, well, then he's the one sinning. He's actually sinning if he doesn't give to the poor at all, and he doesn't, like, give to God. So, like, the Bible talks about we should be rich toward God. So I don't remember what verse exactly it is. So it talks about, so storing up treasure in heaven, I think, is the context. So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. So I don't know if that's a context for sure, but we could look at it. Luke 12:21. Let's see, Michael. Okay, so yeah, this guy, he's I love it. Can I read this parable, Michael? Do you mind?
Yeah, sure. Go for
Okay. Or do you want to say something first? You can say something first if you had.
Just like a short thing. It's not even that related, but I guess I like object to like inheritance, like sociologically. I just think it's where it came from. The rich wanting to preserve their wealth, the introduction of like monogamy, because parents can track who their children were to like continue their like legacy, and then like when you're talking about like what's fair and how to like work for what you earn, inheritance just seems like the complete polar opposite. Just inheriting great wealth seems it's kind of like contrary. I don't know.
Well, I mean, like, Michael, if you really feel that way, you should go live in Uganda.
Without inheritance? What do you mean?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love inheritance. I'd love money. I'd love to be wealthy, but like, just like objectively, it does seem unfair that someone would be richer than me just because of their parents' life.
So yeah, so what you're saying is you wouldn't want to go actually live in Uganda and be poor, but you do feel bad for the people that don't have the financial prosperity as you would have in your country.
Yeah, I mean, I guess then I would prefer everyone live in Uganda.
Just everybody be on the same.
Uganda, and some people live in. Yeah.
But here's what I'm getting at.
So
the question is, does God want everyone to be equal? And the answer to that has to be an obvious no, right? Because if he
Well,
did,
from like an evangelical perspective.
right, well,
But like,
just from looking at
doesn't it just
nature.
seem more fair? Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a good question, but like, let's look at nature for a second, okay? So like, just the way people are made. Some people are stronger than others. Some people are smarter than others. Some people are less strong. Some people are dumber. Those things are not necessarily bad. So God, and this would go back to Romans 9. I mean, we could, like, it's God making his vessels the way he wants to make his vessels. So like the way he wants to make a creature. So like, for example, let's say I am the stupidest person that's ever lived, and I'm just so ugly. Like, let's say that. Let's say I was just like that. I would have no ability to go to God and say, God, you have no right to make me this ugly and this stupid. I don't know why I'm so ugly and stupid. I don't have any right to do that, because the fact that I'm even alive is a gift, and anything that I have is given to me from God. So if I could be even uglier. Like, I could be like 10 times as ugly, and I still wouldn't be able to say, God, you've done me injustice, because we live in a sin-cursed world. Now, here's the interesting part, though. Although in this life we have, distribution of wealth that's not necessarily fair. Like, sometimes evil people, very evil people, will have a lot of wealth. So we talked about this earlier. It says in Proverbs 16:8, better is little with righteousness than great revenues with injustice. That assumes that there are going to be some people that God ordains in this life who are unjust to have more revenue, so more money. And that's not necessarily good. I mean, we live in a fallen world. Like, we would expect the righteous people, the good people, to do better. But in heaven, it's not going to be this way. And so we do experience some of these things living in a fallen world where it's like, this. In heaven, there will be different distribution of wealth, though, but it will be based on, like I said in the introduction, the growth in holiness that you've had in this life. So you can't have any growth in holiness if you're not a Christian. If you don't have faith in God, you can't please God. The Bible says it's impossible without faith to please God. If you're a Christian, then you're on this path. It's what's called sanctification, where you're growing in holiness in this life. That's not what saves you, but it will give you a reward in heaven. Does that make sense, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, the logic of like, you should just be grateful to like be existing in the first place. Like, you could use that to like justify anything. Like, oh, you're a slave, or you got murdered. Well, you lived sometime anyways. You should be grateful. It just seems like not a response. I don't know. It doesn't seem like complete. I don't know.
I mean, it's not what we want to believe. Definitely not. Like our human nature is like, I don't want to believe that, especially if you go through difficult things in life. Like, if you've had comparatively to other people a really difficult life, then you're probably like, well, but that's kind of hard to believe. That's kind of difficult. But that's what we see in the Bible. That's what we see when someone like Paul, he gets shipwrecked and like all these things happen to him. So like he talks about somewhere in the Bible where he's in prison, and then like all these, there were like lots of crazy things. Lived one of the like worst lives after he became a Christian, because people were just like trying to literally torturing Paul in all these different ways because he was a Christian. And this happened to a lot of disciples, and this is historical. I mean, there were actually disciples. They died for the faith, and so like one of them, like, he's crucified upside down. That's Peter. That's the, at least tradition. That's what it teaches, is that he was crucified upside down. But Peter doesn't have anything to say like, God, why did you allow this to happen? Because he is a man, and God is good, and he does good, and we might not know everything that he's going to do because we don't have the mind of God, or why he's doing everything that he's doing. But again, like, I mean, we get so many blessings because as sinners against God, you have to understand, Michael, this is going to change your perspective if you like understand this, is that we all, because we're sinners against God, deserve eternity in hell. That's what we deserve. So every breath that I take It's a gift from God. I don't deserve it. I deserve punishment for my sins, but I haven't yet received it. And that in of itself is gracious. Now, for the Christian, it's even more gracious because you can have no fear of death and be like, wow, I have assurance. I know that I'm going to heaven. And if somebody does actually crucify me upside down, then I would have the ability, of course, assuming that I'm, would be sanctified enough to do so, is go, well, to die is gain. I'm suffering for God's glory, and that's his will, and that's what I must do. So, I mean, there's people that have lived very difficult lives, but we want to stay away from complaining and saying this is really, like I can't do this. It's just too difficult, to going, but think about how bad it could be and what you actually deserve, and that you actually are getting, like, even the worst suffering you could possibly experience in the world. Like, this is a crazy thought, and it actually crazy. So you can think of the worst possible suffering you could ever experience in this world. Just can't even imagine it. Actually, you could think about whatever thing you just don't want. Like, for me, I wouldn't want my eyeballs to be taken out. That's like one of my like worst nightmares, is like that would just like be so scary. But let's say that would happen. Well, that is still way better than going to hell for eternity. In fact, to where Jesus said, if your eye causes you to sin, cut it out and cast it from you, because it's better to go to heaven with one eye than go to hell with both your eyes. So for me, my idea of torture is actually directly answered of, that's actually, that would be way better. So, but there's a lot of different like things. It's like, you can't even imagine how painful, how bad that would be, but hell is way worse. It's way, way worse. But that gives you a perspective. Does that make sense, Michael?
Yeah, I do get that. It's really hard to argue against it though, because it really is just like, it doesn't matter how unjust it is or what's wrong. It's just kind of like judgment. It's just kind of like, it's inarguable. I didn't say that right. I horribly, but yeah. Yeah.
So there might be two reasons why it's like hard to argue against. The first reason is like, I mean, and maybe more, I mean, there's probably way more, but the first is you're saying it's hard to argue against the idea of like judgment, or like what I'm saying about like, what exactly were you saying it's hard to argue against? So I pin it down.
Like that we don't all deserve eternity in hell, because it's just, no matter like how you describe it to be unjust, you can still always just bring it back to that. We don't deserve it to begin with, or
yes,
I mean, or that we don't deserve life to begin with. Sorry.
Yeah. So like the first reason would be it's hard to argue against because, I mean, we just don't like it. We don't like that idea. Because before as a Christian, I really didn't like it. Definitely really didn't like it. Because it's like, you don't want to think of yourself bad. You don't want to think yourself not worth things. I mean, the Bible says every man proclaims his own goodness. We all want to think we're good. We all want to go, yeah, like I'm so good. And the reason why I'm living right now is because God shows favor on me. And that's what like everybody says. If you ask, like, I'm pretty sure more people would say they're going to heaven than people that even believe in heaven. Basically, nobody is going to be like, you know what? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to heaven. Basically, no one says that because everyone thinks they're good people for the most part. Sometimes people are like, yeah, I'm going to hell and I'm okay with it, which is super weird. But that's not normal. So that's the first reason. The second reason is because things that are true are hard to argue against. So, of course, like, if I said 2 + 2 is 4, and then you're like, well, actually it's 5, and then you try to argue against it, it's going to be really difficult because it's not true. And so you can't have an actual, like, consistency across the board where it's like, well, 2 + 2 can't equal 5 because 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 is 4. So 2 + 2 is 4. And so something like that, it's like, well, you can't really argue against it. And then I guess I'll just add a third element. Another reason is because, like, it's before you're a Christian, the Bible describes you as spiritually blind, so unable to see. It also, like, you're spiritually deaf, you're unable to hear. So, like, Jesus said, if the blind leads the blind, both fall into the ditch. So like, imagine a blind person who it's like, they're going to help this other blind person walk. And so they're walking together. And then, but they can't because they're both blind. And so then they just go and they fall into a ditch together. And now they're just like, they're going to die down there because they're just blind and they were, one was trying to lead the other. It doesn't work. The idea of, if you're blind, you're not able to help yourself. You're not able to help others, in the idea of like seeing and going where you are. God actually needs to give you light. So he needs to take you from darkness into light, which is being forgiven your sins by Jesus Christ, who lived the perfect life, died on the cross, and rose again from the dead. Like, trusting in him, now you have light, now you can see. But if you don't see, then it is going to be like pretty difficult. Like if I'm like, if I'm blind and I'm like, I'm pretty sure there is an orange 20 feet away from me, and I've never gone in that direction before, and nobody ever told me, and I can't smell it, then it's gonna be like, well, maybe there is, but like probably not. Normally oranges aren't 20 feet in front of you. So like, it's just, you're not going to really be able to reason, because sometimes you'll be right. Like, a blind person that just tried to guess their surroundings, they're going to get some things right. They're going to be like, there's walls around me, there's a ceiling, there's the floor. Like, you'll be able to get more things right. And some people will get more things right than others. But at the end of the day, they're blind. So they still can't see in reality the way things ought to be. And so that person who is a non-Christian goes, well, it just doesn't seem right that people would go to hell forever. And it just doesn't really make sense to me. And it's like, I understand some aspects and I agree with some aspects, and it's like logical, and you can like kind of reason with some things. But at the end of the day, if you're blind, you're blind. You just can't see. And so someone can like, try to reason some things, but you still can't see. Like, I can explain to you, there's a coffee cup next to you, and now you understand there's a coffee cup next to you. Maybe I tell you, and there's some eggs over to the left of you, but you're like, wait, but I don't smell any eggs. And I'm like, there are though. And so it's just because they're not cracked or something like that. But if you don't feel those things, maybe you just won't believe me. So my point, or you don't see them, would be the proper way to finish that analogy. But the point is, you have to have spiritual eyes to see. You have to go from the darkness to the light. That's what Jesus describes. And so that would probably be 3 reasons. There could be more, but that's just what you would have for that. Does that make sense, Michael?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, you're welcome. I'm going to read this parable right here because we were talking a little bit about this. So I'm going to read this. And I changed the words a little bit because it's Old English, so I just kind of sometimes change it. And just to make it like more modern, kind of like the New King James Version, nothing crazy. And one of the company said unto him, Master, speak to my brother that he divide the inheritance with me. And so this is what Jesus said. Now, I just want to take a second. Jesus could have said a lot of things. So it's like, this guy is like, tell the brother, divide it with me. Like, this isn't, it's like, maybe this guy doesn't think it's fair. Like, he has some inheritance, I have some inheritance. And, of course we should get the same inheritance, or maybe Jesus, maybe he's about to say neither of you should get inheritance. He has a lot of things he could say, but let's see what Jesus says. He says to him, man, who made me a judge or a divider over you? So some people would say that seems rude. Probably a lot of people, because if somebody speaks directly, they're considered rude. Jesus was known by his boldness and how he like really was like straight on issues. And so he was actually admired because of that in a lot of ways. But a lot of people would go, wow, you're saying who made me judge or divider over you? Why didn't you just say, well, I'd please not like to answer that question, thank you, or something like that. I mean, but let's see what his point is here. So this is what Jesus said. Take heed and beware of covetousness. So that's the 10th commandment. He's desiring something that doesn't belong to him. For a man's life does not consist in the abundance of the things which he possesses. So he's actually confronting his sin. He's like, you actually have a sin problem. You're breaking the 10th commandment, and you're trying to ask me to help you to break the 10th commandment. That's ridiculous. It's actually sinful. So that's what he's going to tell this guy. And I should have said foolish instead of ridiculous, but it was kind of the similar in the way I used it. So this is what Jesus said. So then he's going to speak a parable. So Jesus loves to use parables because he gets the point across to see if he's going to get it. Okay, so this is his parable. He said, "The ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully." So like imagine like the ground, like he's tilling the ground, like he's going to try to get crops. So this rich man, he wants to get crops, and it was really successful. He got a lot of crops, which probably means he's going to make a lot of money, and he's rich. And he thought within himself, saying, "What shall I do? Because I have no room where to bestow my fruits." So he got all these fruits from like the plentiful ground, but like now he doesn't know what to do. He's like, what's going to happen? I mean, I don't have anywhere. Where's everything going to go? I just have too much. And so he said, "This will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will bestow all my fruits and my goods." So, okay, this is easy. He's just going to build more. This is easy solution. There you go. And he's going to have plenty of fruits and lots of things, and it's going to be fantastic. And then this is what he's going to say. And I will say to my soul, "Soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry." So he's going to go like, well, now I have plenty. I'm going to be good for like the rest of my life. I'm just going to eat. I'm just going to live luxuriously. So like eat, drink, and be merry is synonymous in the Bible for you're going to live it up. Like luxury, like you have all that you need. So this rich man, he's going to be good for life basically. But watch this. "But God said to him, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of you. Then whose things will those be which thou hast provided?" So basically, he's storing up for himself. He's going to eat, drink, and be merry. He thinks he's got a long life ahead of him. But God said, "Not so fast. You're a fool, and your life belongs to me. And you're going to die, and those things are no longer going to belong to you." And so that's what's going to happen. But this guy, he thinks that he's going to be selfish. He's going to save all this up for himself. And then the last verse says, "So is he that lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God." So leading into that last verse of being rich toward God is you can lay up treasure for yourself. You can get a lot of treasure. You can be selfish. But ultimately, if you're not rich toward God and other people as well, like, caring for the widow, the orphan, the poor, things like that. But if you're not rich toward God, then what are you thinking? You're thinking you're going to live in luxury. You're going to be happy. You want to be maybe very rich. You think, okay, well, that's going to be great. He's telling this parable as a explicit rebuke to this man, a direct rebuke. So this guy wants the inheritance divided, and he's telling this parable to be like, hey, you're like this guy in the story because you want to just be like, I'm going to get that inheritance and eat and drink and be merry. And perhaps Jesus was even being prophetic. We don't know. I mean, maybe this guy, maybe he actually had plans like this. Maybe he wanted to get the inheritance and then he was going to eat, drink, and be merry and all these things. We don't know. But the whole point is, don't just go for these things on earth. You're going to die. And that's the fact that gets so many people to actually consider Christianity, because they're like, oh, wait, no, that actually happens. People around me do die, and it doesn't seem like it should be real. It's scary and it doesn't make any sense. But people are actually dying, and so there's something that must happen. But the point is, instead of just ignoring that thought of death and go that's scary, I don't want to think about it, you should actually realize this rebuke and go, well, wait a minute, maybe Jesus is onto something, which he is, because he's talking about this guy who is so consumed with his money and isn't rich toward God and might not even give God a thought. But God decides, out of his sovereign will, he goes, this night your soul will be required of you. And then your things, they'll vanish like you from the earth. But even afterward, there'll be a judgment. And so that's why, because there will be a judgment. It's appointed unto man once to die, and after this, the judgment. The wages of sin is death. So all people will die. That is why it matters to be rich toward God. And that is why Jesus was getting this man to think to put aside his riches, to put aside all of his things, all of his life possessions and his inheritance, because this guy, he asks a basic question. And Jesus turned this into, you're sinning. You need to stop sinning. That's actually wrong. And here's what's actually true. And then also, I'm going to give you a parable. And this was actually loving of Jesus because he's showing this man, here, this is your problem. So Jesus, again, he's the great physician. So a doctor is going to hurt you sometimes. And if the doctor never hurts you, even when you have like a serious ailment, well, it's probably not a good doctor, because unless they're using some kind of good, like, medicine that's going to help you, but I'm not talking about that. Like, for instance, if you have like, if your, let's say your bones are broken, okay, you've got a broken bone. Okay, well, a doctor, before anesthesia, like my bone got broken before. What they had to do, they had to set it back in place, okay? They actually gave me anesthesia because they didn't want me to experience that immense pain. But if I were awake, what would have happened is I would have experienced a lot of pain, and it would seem like the doctor wasn't loving. But Jesus, as a good doctor, as a good physician who's trying to heal people and help them, he's going to do something that will be very painful for this man to hear. He's telling him that he's sinning, that he's breaking the 10th commandment. And technically he says, take heed and beware of covetousness. Because and it doesn't explicitly say like you are coveting, but the point's certainly there is like, okay, don't be covetous, with this, because you don't want to be based off of your things and your inheritance and things like this. And that's not really Jesus's purpose. His purpose is not to be some kind of, divine inheritance decider, but this guy wants that to happen. So we see there, what really matters is being rich toward God. And that does require work. Like, we actually are working to be rich toward God. You can't be rich toward God if you don't have anything. So if I were saying, I want to be, Michael, Mystic, I really want to help you guys. I really want to be kind to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sleep 12 hours a day, and I'm going to eat for 4 hours a day. And the rest of my day, I think I'm just going to sit around. You would say, Dimitri, you're not helping me. You're not doing anything for me. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll give you, I'll give you some money. So I pull out my wallet, and then there's no money in there. And so I'll just decide to do the exact same thing I did the last few days, which is staying 12 hours in bed and 4 hours and all that. And it's like, well, Dimitri, you're not going to be able to help me because you don't have any money, one. The next thing, you're not going to help me like intellectually because you don't study anything. Like, you're just like sitting in bed and like not doing anything. Like, that's what you would say. But someone who works, say someone who like reads a lot, someone who has a lot to contribute to society, they actually can be helpful toward a person. Okay, so a doctor who studies and becomes a good doctor, they can help their patients, and they can go, oh, okay, well, I studied this, I learned this, I took the effort, I was diligent, and now I'm going to help you. And in the same way, if we're diligent in our lives, so we work hard and things like this, then we can go, here you go, God, I'm being rich toward you. I'm going to give you what I have, which is already yours anyway, but I'm going to give it to you because I love you, and you have saved me, you've forgiven me my sins, and I'm going to be rich toward you because you told me to. And it actually requires work to do that. So, any other thoughts, guys?
No, not in the last bit. That was good. But just separately, I think the parable as application, like, just as good, like, outside of Christianity. Invest all your interest into money, and you'll lose sight of what really matters. I think that's a good concept, like, anywhere used without specifically being rich in God.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, there's a lot, like even the Proverbs I mentioned. And here, I'll pull up my script on the screen. I don't normally do this, but just to get some of these Proverbs back in mind, I'll make them a little bit bigger. Because these things, they have a truth in a physical way and then a spiritual way too. So for example, like a slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. So like basically don't just like do nothing, like go do things. You know, there's another one. I really like this one. This one's really good. Like where is it? Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little increases. That one's good too. Like don't just like, you're not doing a get rich quick scheme. Like things take time. You need to like do that. There's one about like just talking, just like talk, just like, okay. In all toil, there is profit. Okay. So when you're working, it's a good thing. Like something good's going to come out of it, but mere talk tends only to poverty. So like some people have in their mind, like people who, they just talk about what they're going to do all the time, but they never do anything. Like, that's what it's talking about. So if I were like, I am going to build a house, I'm going to build, and it's going to be so big, and everybody's going to throw parties in my house. And it's like, I never do anything. Like I spend more effort talking about it than if I just did it. And so like 15 years later, you have a guy who's like, he's spent all of his life just talking about how he's going to have a big mansion, and he's never done anything to contribute to that. But the effort that he's put in to like talk about it, it's like really foolish, because he spent all this time just talking about it, where it's like difficult even to talk about sometimes. But he could have actually been toiling and working hard, and he might actually have like a house by now or something. So, just kind of, there's a lot, like Proverbs especially, it's all over. But then you also have the spiritual aspect. So for instance, like in all toil there is profit, but mere talk tends only to poverty. Like we can apply this spiritually and say, someone who is going to, like the Bible says faith without works is dead. So this would go back to even like something like James 2, where if you talk about Christianity all the time, but you never live a Christian faith, you're just like, you know what? I'm a Christian, and I want to be a hard worker, and I just say all these things, but I never do it. Well, you're going to be spiritually poor. So that's the beauty of the Proverbs. You can look at these Proverbs, and I don't know if it's with every one, but I see a lot of them where, at the very least, if it's not all of them, where you can just go, okay, what's the physical application? Then what's the spiritual application? Because wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. I could say the same thing spiritually. Like, as far as like, if you gain like hastily, you're trying to like, basically Jesus talks about the parable of like, you're trying to, the guy that's trying to get over the fence in or the gate, like he's going to try to get in the gate of heaven another way than he's supposed to. So he's going to try to like come in this other way. But Jesus said he's the only way. So he's the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to me but by the Father. So you can try to get in heaven the easy way. You can try to get in there, nice and quick, like you're just going to get in there. But there is an actual like toil. Now, there's a probably a better way to make that kind of relate, but because you don't really get in heaven. There's a sense in which you get in heaven little by little, but like the moment you're saved, you're converted, all your sins are forgiven. And the actual working out to get to heaven is like, you're getting there little by little in a sense, but you're forgiven all your sins at once. You're instantaneously made perfect, but then you live through your life, you're on the race and things like that. So I would say the spiritual application that I just made is accurate, but like you can look at those physical and spiritual, and they're both like tremendously true and good. And they're, something we should think about. So,
yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for coming. I'm going to end the recording, and then I'll talk to you guys for a second before I have to leave. And thank you guys very much. Thank you for watching the Covenant Calls podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a like and subscribe. And for those of you on Spotify, please give us a good review. God bless you all.